Hello, and welcome to Planning and Preparing for Economic Changes in 2025. You know, this is a light topic we decided to do on this Tuesday because nothing's happening out there, right? Well, I have Jeremy and Michael with me. I'll introduce them in a moment. But new year, new administration, and many changes in store for this dynamic time for the staffing industry. In this webinar, we're going to look at economic trends, regulatory updates, and more, and we aim to help your staffing firm prepare for the economic and regulatory changes now and in the future. Logistics. DJ mentions a few things here, but the main thing I'm interested in is your questions. We love questions. However, we realize that this is a big topic and we may not get to all of them. So if we don't, Jeremy and the team at Advance Partners has promised to get back to you with some answers, and they'll work with Michael. Just pop the Q&A button open where the three dots is and submit your questions. The biggest question we get, of course, is when will we get the slides? And that's usually about 48 hours after the webinar. In terms of SIA, well, you know a little bit about SIA. We make the world of work better. We inform, connect, and elevate the workforce solutions ecosystem. And as many of you know already, SIA is the global advisor for staffing and workforce solutions. We offer a range of research, advisory, events, editorial products, and certification and training for staffing firms and more. Coming up, Executive Forum North America in beautiful Miami. You'll see Jeremy and the team at booth 403. If you haven't registered already, please feel free to go to siexecutiveforum.com. Right next week, right, Jeremy? Okay, so let me introduce these speakers. Jeremy first joined Advance Partners in 2004 and has overall P&L responsibilities for the business, which has grown tremendously since the start of his tenure as senior leader. He and his team focus on staffing firm growth and empowerment and offering guidance and vision for future success. Michael Schultz is SIA's economist, and he applies his professional and academic background to analysis that is specifically focused on the business cycle dynamics of the staffing industry. My name is Adrienne Nelson. I'm the Vice President of Solutions Delivery here at SIA. Now, let's take a moment to hear a little bit more from Jeremy about why Advance Partners chose to be here and share this incredibly interesting and timely topic. Jeremy?
Thank you, Adrienne. Great to be here. We got the band back together. This is our second year doing this webinar, and just about the same time. Last year we were talking about what's coming down the pike, what was going to happen with the election, potential impacts of what's going on in this great country of ours. One of the things that I love about my job for the last almost 21 years, as Adrienne mentioned, is connecting with staffing firm owners, like all of you, owners, operators, members of teams. Advance Partners has a single-minded focus on this industry. We are committed to it for 27 years. Interestingly, a fun fact, if anyone cares, it was 27 years ago today. So March 4th, 1998, that's when we started as a company. Always focused on this industry, and I love to tell people that when I first got here, I knew nothing about this industry. I've learned it from many people that are on this webinar right now, just kind of vicariously through people's trials and tribulations, blood, sweat, and tears, and that's what I have the privilege of getting to see day in, day out, and working with firms like yours. So we have a lot of material today. And looking forward to great questions, and like Adrienne said, the ones we don't get to today, you'll hear from us, because we want to answer as many of them as we can, and try to emerge as a community during these times that we find ourselves in, stronger and united and aligned on best ways to move forward. So very excited to be here, and appreciate this.
All right, thanks, Jeremy. Now we'll move on to our agenda, because I know y'all want to know what you're going to hear today. You're going to hear about economic trends and staffing. You're going to hear about tariffs, immigration, and DE&I. Where are we with legislative changes? A federal workforce update for those of you with federal contracts or impacted by government contracts, what to consider. And then we'll finish up with some thoughts on what you can do and some Q&A. All right, sound good, Michael? You ready to go? Here comes our economist.
All right, got to get myself off mute.
There you go.
So I thought we'd start off with a recap before going into some of the staffing trends recently, as well as how forecasts for 2025 and the future have recently changed. So first off, in a broader context, 2024 was weaker, was slower than 22 and 23, but it remained quite strong, especially we consider how slow the recovery was from the Great Recession and the financial crisis. We'll see more of that context later, but pretty good growth, even with the slowdown. Employment increased over the course of the year by 2.1 million for folks on payrolls, so a bit different number for including the self-employed, a bit higher. And that's an increase of 1.3% versus 2023. The unemployment rate, however, increased by 40 basis points, up from 3.6% on average in 2023. And then similarly relevant for staffing as that increase in the unemployment rate, job openings declined by 14%. Not something you generally expect when the economy is growing so well.
It's a big number.
And we also had a bit of an unusual mix for what sectors provided employment gains. Overwhelmingly, really, it was in healthcare. So of that 2.1 million added jobs, almost 1 million were just in healthcare. And then a distant second place was in the government sector. But even there, if you dive down into some of the more detailed statistics, 10% of the gains in government employment were also healthcare. It was gains in government-run hospitals, things like the VA system. The rest of it for government was almost entirely state and local government, and that is schools, as well as kind of general who's your county clerk kind of positions. So back to staffing specifically, where we had employment gains was not in the staffing intensive sectors, and that goes part to why staffing's been weak. If we had, by the BLS count, a decline of over 8% for temporary help employment in 2024 versus 2023. But given that GDP growth figure, historically, you'd expect that staffing revenue would be up 6 or 7% in 2024, and that the BLS temp help figure for employment would have been up 4%. Instead, well, as of September, our forecast had 2024 down 10% on revenue, and we have the final number from the BLS, again, down more than 8%. We will have a forecast update in just about 1 week, by the way. It should come out while we're at Executive Forum. Well, what's going on? Most basically, the staffing industry is following the deceleration in the overall labor market. But we've also had more of a deceleration than you'd normally expect to see without tipping over the whole economy into recession. And that's part of the disconnect over the past few years. Things had grown so much that as they normalize, they've actually undershot and gone in the labor market to being weaker than you'd expect for the overall environment. As said a moment ago, the unemployment rate increased by 40 basis points last year, and job openings decreased by 14%. Well, hiring slowed down even more than job openings, and combined you get this uptrend in the vacancy yield, which effectively you can think of the vacancy yield as a whole economy fill rate. How many people were hired in this time period versus how many job openings employers were trying to fill in the previous time period. And a higher vacancy yield basically says that labor is more available relative employers' demand for additional workers. And something that I really want to drive home as a point too, we still see, if we just look at the level of that ratio, it would imply that workers are still really scarce relative to desired employment gains. But I think it's the trend, the momentum, the change in the labor market variables that really drive staffing activity. So back to, again, unemployment increased, availability of workers improved, increased, made it easier to do your own recruiting. And if it's getting easier to do your own recruiting and now you've gotten accustomed to having a horrible slog of it from all the labor shortages in 2021, 2022, maybe your perspective is, well, it's getting easier. We can continue doing it ourselves. Going directly to measures of the staffing industry, wanted to bring some information from our Pulse survey. This is every 2-month survey, longer full report given to participants, some more general top-line data for all other SIA members. This data right now is still, I believe, December as the most recent. We'll have another update about a month's time. So we saw some improving trends, less bad year over year on a sequential basis for the commercial segments and some of the professional segments. Here I've highlighted really the biggest 3 segments for staffing, so industrial, IT staffing, and then 2 subsegments for healthcare overall. Industrial actually saw growth at the end of 2024, which was very welcome, and I think this is what's driving the few months of gains we saw in the BLS figures. But there's also a lot to suggest it's a blip, a bit of a flash in the pan. After the election, with anticipated changes in trade policy, so tariffs, as we just had it put on last night in a big way, a lot of consumers went out and bought things that they thought would be impacted by tariffs, things like cell phones, computers, vehicles, and also businesses thought, our production costs might go up, so we are going to fill our warehouses as much as we can for any imported parts we need right now. And so that created a lot of activity for especially the logistics and transportation warehousing sectors very suddenly, and that gave us this increase in industrial staffing. Now, we also saw improvement in IT, and that seems to be more organic and hopefully sustainable. But then we continue to have the healthcare sector normalizing off its pandemic highs.
Okay, so Michael, one question, you said less bad. Less bad. Go back one slide. Jeremy, what are you seeing with your clients?
So our clients track about 4% of the total U.S. population, or staffing industry, I should say. And I would say that our sliver of the pie is tracking fairly closely with what we're seeing here. We, as Michael mentioned, we did see an uptick in the industrial area, and perhaps it was, preemptive purchasing, kind of the reverse supply chain effect that we saw at the end of the pandemic, or whatever stage of the pandemic that was, when we went to the store and couldn't find anything because there was nothing on the shelves. I think just a general comment too, even going back to the last slide as well, this downturn, just trying to make sense of the numbers. I'm not the economist here, but just I wish I was, but
I don't know about that.
I think that and I've talked to a lot of staffing owners that agree with this statement. I think that there was sort of a loss for the value proposition of what these great staffing firms provide the buyers. The dramatic escalation in wages that just happened virtually overnight. A buyer of staffing could get, I'm just making up the numbers, but $10,000 a week in billings, they could get 10 people. Now that 10,000 is getting them 8. And I think that's contributed to a lot of the numbers that you're seeing here below the line, just kind of revamping the psyche of the buyers, and getting them reminded that, hey, this is a good way to go. We're the shock absorbers for the labor market. You're not certain you want to hire full-time employees. go to an agency and, you know, take a swing. So hopefully that's what's going to happen. But I think that, you know, we've fallen prey to that. And I'm, you know, my anecdotal experience with our client base and just talking to people, that's what I'm seeing.
Well, you've been doing this a little while, so we'll take that advice.
Thanks.
And I will follow up on something Jeremy just said. Definitely some of the disconnect between staffing and the overall economy versus what you historically expect is from compression of bill rates versus the direct higher employment costs. So that most entirely is on the commercial side, so industrial staffing being impacted particularly, but historically you had more of a cost savings motivation for clients making use of staffing services than the current environment is going to encourage. Now back to the slides. So I mentioned earlier that the poll survey data is through December right now. So I wanted to make certain to bring in our weekly data for what's happening with staffing volumes. This is through 1 week ago. We'll get another update today, possibly releasing right now as we're talking actually, but we also see here at the end of 2024, big surges up for commercial staffing and similar, but not quite as dramatic for professional staffing during November, and then with some volatility, but more movement to year-over-year gains in volumes. But again, it's probably not something that's going to be sustained, unfortunately, at least in my opinion. And then back to how has the outlook changed? So I like to use the Survey of Professional Forecasters. It has a group of about 40 to 50 groups and people whose whole job is forecasting as a panel, so you can consistently see how they as a group are thinking about economic developments. And I do have a long time series on all of these to provide full historical context across the last 4 recessions. So I mentioned
It's a
before
long historical perspective, Michael. Wow. Okay.
I know it's a bit hard to make sense of in some cases. I just really want to provide that context.
Okay.
So I mentioned before that GDP growth and employment growth actually were really healthy on that longer timeline during 2024, even though they were down significantly from 2023. On all of these charts, the gray lines are the current Survey of Professional Forecasters median estimate for how things will move. And the black lines are the data as available in November for the last round of the panel. So essentially across the board, we have a theme. The Survey of Professional Forecasters respondents expected higher GDP growth in 2025 as of February versus what they were projecting in November. But then also that causes, if you don't get enough of a slowdown in really consumption spending, you have persistently elevated inflation. You get this trade-off on inflation and activity. And so the changes in the forecast for GDP growth suggest some pull ahead of activity from further out years into 2025 and 2026. So trading longer term growth and stability for more activity right now. But then higher inflation, let's be in the next page, leading to more need to tighten policy to bring inflation down, leading to actually increased, sorry, that was my timer, it wasn't supposed to have a sound on it, increased unemployment instead of decreasing unemployment over the next few years. Increasing unemployment, not supportive for staffing, unfortunately. Inflation I already mentioned, now projected to be higher and remain higher over the next few years than was previously expected, leading to higher interest rates to counter that higher inflation. And unfortunately now also, interest rates are expected to plateau at about 4%, so not much additional relief.
Yeah. So Michael, I'm curious, Jeremy has clients that are looking at this, and I wanted to just get his perspective on GDP and unemployment as you've presented it, but also on this inflation and interest rates, because they're kind of related.
Most certainly. Well, the GDP slide that sort of parallels the last couple decades, the Great Recession, and then I like to call it the 10-year winning streak from 10 to 20, where everything was above the line in terms of growth, and then the volatility. It's wonderful to be having conversations like this with someone of Michael's capabilities, because it's really, as business owners, leaders, operators, we have to look at these data points to try to make heads or tails of what's happening. And it passes prologue. You look at the trends here, and they tell a story that can definitely it falls in line with our industry, even with it being the last couple of years, I would say, being somewhat counter-cyclical, as some of the numbers that Michael shared would reflect. But it's really important to look at this stuff, and we're lucky that we have SIA to lean on too for the ever-changing landscape. I look forward to my noon email every day with the latest and greatest from Michael and his team with what's going on, because these things matter. Quick comment too about interest rates. It would appear that like Michael said, things are going to level off, and there's predictions. We actually get guidance from our parent company, Paychex, their treasury group, on what they're seeing coming down the pike. They're really good. They're usually within a whisker of what's going to happen, and they're expecting maybe two rate drops the remainder of the calendar year, and maybe a little bit going into next year. But no one has a crystal ball. But the expectation is that if they do continue to come down, at most another 100 basis points, and then staying right there, the days of, I don't want to call it free money, but the days of money being extraordinarily cheap for banks to lend, like we had in the past couple of decades, are probably in the rearview mirror. So we need to adjust our expectations and plan accordingly.
Back to you, Michael.
Okay, just a real quick, succinct tie together for these 4 macroeconomic forecast series I've been highlighting. I think the key takeaway for staffing with these and the changes in the forecasts versus what was out there in November is that we can expect some more labor market weakening, ongoing cost and thus wage pressure, and unfortunately also little additional relief on interest rates and financing costs for the foreseeable future. Then I have one last slide here. We've got a very unique environment where keep hearing this and seeing it in transcripts from earnings calls and commentary and so on. Businesses and clients are extremely optimistic, but no one's actually doing anything with that optimism. At the same time as there is so much optimism among businesses, we also have, depending on what measure you use, either elevated or all-time record high levels of uncertainty. You normally don't see those two go together. So unfortunately, for the time being, the uncertainty is winning out. So everyone's kind of sitting on their hands going, well, what's going to happen now, before committing to new projects, investments, and initiating any new programs or going back to contingent staffing. But that might subside. We could always see that flip to the optimism winning out, and that would provide a nice tailwind supporting demand for staffing activity. Just right now, and so far, it's the uncertainty in the driver's seat.
Yeah, may you live in interesting times. Wow. Jeremy, you compared this to a Jackson Pollock painting.
Yes, Jackson Pollock, I mean, the colors kind of reminded me of that. We have something at, I'm in Cleveland, for those that don't know. Cleveland. The Cleveland Museum of Art has a piece of art that has colors that are similar to this, but this graph looks like someone with, if they have a heart ailment, they just had a blip. But the good part is after each of those blips in the past, things kind of calm down and kind of right-size themselves, and cooler heads prevail. So hopefully that's the case.
I suppose I should highlight as well that uncertainty can be good for use of contingent staffing because that increases the importance of having flexibility in your activities. So once the optimism starts to win out, really hoping that clients and broader business communities will say, we really want to go back to our staffing partners because we're still a bit uncertain, we're still a bit squeamish about what might happen in the next year, so we don't have permanent employees. And our staffing partners can help us still accomplish our projects and initiatives despite that hesitation on permanent employees.
Well, staffing is definitely a good friend of uncertainty in some cases. Okay, and now
Definitely.
over to Jeremy. Jeremy, what is to come in 2025? Tell us, please tell us.
I think we can just change it. What's already come in 2025 as recently as the last few hours. So just underscoring the agenda that Adrian threw out, we're going to start talking about tariffs. So this slide had to be updated literally within the last couple hours because of everyone's probably heard the 25% tariffs on Canadian and Mexican imports that were initially on again, off again on February 3rd with a 30-day moratorium for leaders of the different countries to talk and posture and see what happens. But in case you haven't seen it, last night at midnight they went into effect, and there's already been reciprocal tariffs, retaliatory tariffs by our friends to the north and south that will probably continue on certain products. We also have 10% tariffs on imported goods from China. Now these just went up to 20% in the last few hours as well, and there have been some responses from China. We were talking the other day in preparation for the webinar about some of the reactions of the corporate community in the United States, most notably Apple. I don't know if you saw, I think it was last week or maybe the week before, they made an announcement of $500 billion in investment in the U.S. over the next 10 years, all over the country, adding different factories and depots all throughout, red states, blue states, you name it. And they've been very outspoken that, hey, if it's going to cost us money to bring it in, why don't we do it here? Which seems like an awfully good idea. So do more companies follow suit in that regard? I guess we just have to wait and see. But in the meantime, there's a lot of great stuff online right now about tariffs. It's kind of Tariff 101 kind of materials because this is new-ish, not the first time, but to this degree. If the companies that have to pay the tariffs, so the importers, if they don't pass the entirety of the costs on to the consumers, then that's going to eat their margins. It's going to take away from some of their profitability. If they do pass it on, then the consumers get to pay for it, which is appearing to be the case. Perhaps in the auto industry, there's talks of cars being $3,000-$4,000 more expensive. I don't think anyone really knows yet, honestly, but there is going to be something there. What I think we as a community need to be focused on is what's this going to do to the labor market? Is it going to stimulate or decelerate employment? Is it going to, and is it, in related topic, is it going to reduce production? Are more factories and different outlets around this country, are they going to need temps or are they going to not need it because businesses are cutting back in response to higher costs? We don't know. We don't know, but it's certainly something we all need to watch.
Hey, Jeremy, 1 second. I'd like to go to Michael for a second just to get his perspective on tariffs and how he sees that affecting staffing.
Certainly.
I'm going to try to keep this succinct. So you can think of tariffs as kind of a transfer payment. There are winners and losers for manufacturers, whether it is a specific comparison of two companies or even two products within the same company. You can get down to differential impacts from two different vehicles made on the exact same assembly line having very different cost changes due to tariff policy. So there will definitely be companies that benefit from increased business if their competitors or competing products have more exposure to international trade than they themselves do. That will allow the beneficiaries a bit of a strategic price power where they could, as Jeremy brought up, keep their pricing for their products more or less in line with the cost increase they get and take a bunch of market share from the competitors, or they could raise their pricing just as much as their competitors with more trade exposure are forced to maintain profitability, and then just have higher per unit profit in a lower market. In both cases, the overall market does decline, though, because the cost basis for the whole production system is being pushed away from the cost minimizing production network. So winners and losers abound with tariff policies and trade restrictions. Your mileage will vary significantly depending upon who your particular clients are and whether they, relative their competitors, are more or less impacted by or exposed to trade restrictions.
Got it.
And as Jeremy brought up as well, there are offsetting effects. That's much more of a long-term impact. The tariff-driven changes are sharpest initially, but over time, the economic long run, you have adjustments to production networks, factories come in, supply chains reroute, and so on. But that is more of a 5-year, 10-year out
Gotcha.
impact and offset.
Thank you for that. We appreciate it.
Thank you.
Now let's move on to another interesting topic, immigration policy. Jeremy.
Another fun one. Everybody that has been paying attention knows that there's been a change in immigration policies through the election and now to where we are now with most notably mass deportations starting to take effect and probably increasing. Where is this going to be most profoundly felt? Manufacturing space, so that would encompass light industrial, third-party logistics, warehousing that relies heavily on the immigrant community to staff a lot of these large facilities. Fully expect, and certainly already have talked to clients that are saying, yeah, it's been challenging. It was not easy before. It's a little bit more difficult now. Construction firms, lots of them, both moderately skilled and highly skilled, even that rely on skilled trades folks coming from other countries. They're likely not getting in now, but are they going? Those that are here are going to be able to continue in their roles in agriculture, farming communities that have heavily impacted by the immigrant community. It's not just on the blue collar side, the white collar side. The IT space is also facing an impact. I'm sure people have seen conversations about the H-1 visa program, which has come under fire for the belief by some that they take away from the H-1B visa holders are taking away jobs from Americans that could otherwise be fulfilled by folks here. Also very prevalent, those are friends in the nurse staffing healthcare community. That's been a program that has really driven that sector as well. So what's going to happen with those programs, it remains to be seen and could definitely tighten the workforce in those key areas. Then we have DE&I, which is, to be fair, been controversial in some circles from, for a while. The executive order signed in January preventing DEI initiatives and practices amongst federal agencies and government contractors. So there you go. And then you have corporations following suit as well, with some concerns about the legality of their programs, such as Target being one of the frontliners. But then you have other firms like Costco who have said, no, we're going to continue with the program and go about our way. Either way, it's a mixed bag. And what's the impact on staffing going to be? A lot of the DEI training is expected to decrease because it's perhaps falling out of favor It might alter hiring practices for contractors that could affect staffing firms that remain compliant with certain diversity requirements. Also, set-asides from spending standpoint. For years, we've had clients that have been involved with WeBank or NMSDC, the National Minority Supplier Diversity Council. What the future looks like for those agencies, remains to be seen, and the buying habits of their members. Interestingly, though, and this was a survey that was published by SIA shortly after the executive order was signed, found that 65% of the firms that they polled actually plan on maintaining their DEI initiatives. And the reason for that is, at least in part, among some studies, that it helps DEI programs help employee retention as well as productivity. So it's an important cost of doing business that some feel is still worthy. And then also 22% of those polled actually plan on increasing their efforts. So really going against the grain, which I found interesting. Finally, we have the federal workforce update. Executive order signed on February 3rd offering buyouts to almost 3 million federal employees. We all probably know someone, either friends or family, that got one of these notifications offering severance through the fall, and they can leave. This is the strategy that's been employed to cut down the federal workforce. It's a move that likely threatens staffing firms who provide contract workers to federal agencies. We have a number of them that work with us, and there's definitely some concerns about the continued viability of this space. We'll just have to kind of play a wait and see. I think in the end, I think they're going to continue, but they might not be winning new opportunities in light of the second portion of the slide, which the second order coming down, or a related order signaling an immediate hiring freeze on all federal hiring. So just stopping hiring dead in its tracks. And the expectation is that that's likely going to decrease demand, at least in the short term, until things are kind of sorted out here. So definitely something to watch. And this is another one that's changing by the millisecond. You've seen people that have been laid off and then recalled. So I think it's going to be interesting to see the final tale of the tape on what the federal workforce looks like in a couple months as things play out.
Okay, well, Jeremy, given that, what can our staffing leaders do? I mean, this is a lot of information. We know sort of what's going on up to the minute. As far as we could rally for that, talk to us about the uncertainty and what can people do?
Sure. So we don't want you to throw up your hands and give up. That's not why we're here. We divided this into two separate buckets, the tactical and, yes, the emotional steps. These are unique times, and we feel like there's some emotion that needs to play into this as well. Excuse me. On the tactical side, it's always a good idea to diversify your client base, but especially if your primary sourcing is federal contracts, I would carry this over to any large corporate space, because the buying habits of many of these corporations that I mentioned a moment ago could be at least in flight. I didn't coin the phrase. It's not good to put all your eggs in one basket, especially now when eggs are really expensive. By the way, sorry, that was a bad joke. But it's particularly important now just to have depth in your client log because of some of these changing scenarios. Making sure you're prepared for unexpected I-9 audits. This is something that I've talked to with clients for years. It's a good practice to have. You just never know. You want to do things the right way anyway, but I view this as a stress test. Act as if someone showed up on your door one day, from the government, and see how you do. Do you pass muster? Do you pass your own I-9 test? Do you have everything, all your ducks in a row? It's a good idea.
Like a drill.
Like a drill, right? Better when you do the drill enough times than when hopefully the main event doesn't happen, but if it does, you're prepared. So then, related topic ensuring that your employees have proper documentation with them while at work, copies of everything readily available, so they feel comfortable that they're not literally in harm's way going to work. It's kind of a unique dynamic right now, but that's sort of where things are in a certain sector. Staying engaged with your local elected officials, always a good idea, but especially now. You might love everything that's happening right now. You might hate it. There are intended and unintended consequences of all the legislative and executive action that we're seeing here. And it's important to keep you are a constituent. We're all constituents of whomever represents us. Stay in his or her ear just to keep them apprised of what's happening, because they want to know. They should want to know the impact that some of these measures are having on them, and some of them, especially the unintended ones, which ultimately, at the end of the day, if there's a potential for having a contracting effect on the labor market, the economy in general, people are going to want to hear about that, especially elected officials who the state of the economy is frequently a bellwether for electability. So just something to keep in mind.
So just curious, Jeremy, what local officials should staffing firms kind of lean into? What are you seeing as most successful?
Not to take anything away from senators, but they have 6-year terms. Members of Congress have 2-year terms, and they are, I'm not trying to be cynical here, just factual. They are in constant reelection mode. And they need to hear from all of us on what's happening. Again, good or bad, because that is they are most vulnerable to being ousted if things aren't going great.
Gotcha.
And I alluded to a moment ago, the emotional piece. Be there emotionally. It's smart business practice for all of us in our businesses to be very intentional about our people, making sure they're doing okay, helping them mitigate any potential fears that they have, that, layoffs are coming, or that they should have any concerns about coming to work. That's the last thing we want them to do. We're in an industry that we rely on perfect attendance. We want our temps to come to work every day, because if they don't, that hurts the productivity of staffing firms. That's not a novel concept. Everybody knows that. So if we can promote a safe work environment, both physically and emotionally, not the worst time to have the attendance awards, the Amazon gift cards for people that come to work every day. I know that I've seen that successful in certain sectors. Pull out all the stops. Let's have people comfortable coming in, and this too shall pass. Things will calm down, and whatever the new normal is, us getting used to it, we need our staffs to be able to do that in all businesses. So vitally important.
Okay. Thank you, Jeremy. All right. So let us try and summarize this, my friends. So I guess in summary, what I'd like to think will happen, or not will happen, but, we've talked about here is really, how can staffing firms address this? Things are changing day by day. Fasten your seatbelts, prepare for the unexpected. We're staffing. We do that anyway. And then make sure your book of business is diversified enough to roll with the economic and legislative ups and downs. Strategically diversify your business. Examine your business lines to gauge effects. Where are you most exposed? We talked about IT, manufacturing, construction, agriculture. Ensure access to proper documentation. Communicate that really clearly, and what workers and internal folks need to know. Do those fire drills, or not fire drills, but do the drills. Continue to control selling, general, and administrative expenses. Staffing firms do that anyway. It's part of how you run a successful business in staffing. Change is constant. You've got to utilize the resources you have at hand to stay ahead of the curve. One way is to obviously listen to webinars like these, engage, in research from SIA and others. Look at technology and how it can help you. There's so many tools out there to help you stay ahead of the game. Solutions providers can help you learn more, whether you're at Executive Forum North America or you check out our supplier directory and reports. Government policy is changing so rapidly. Stay informed and prepare internally to support staff and workers ahead of time. With that, I think it's time to go to the questions. And yes, you have not disappointed me. Thank you, audience. You have provided lots of questions for us. Now I have to think of where should we start here. I'm exclusively working in federal contracts and looking to diversify these after these new executive orders. What should I do first, Jeremy?
Well, I think that's a good idea. Good idea to diversify, like we talked about. I would look at the skill sets of the folks that you've been placing with the federal government and seeing what kind of crossover capability they have in the private sector. I think that could be very interesting. So, yeah, one that comes to mind. We've had clients that have worked in the health space with the Department of Veterans Affairs, which even there's talks of cutbacks there. Health professionals in that space, they probably have different credentials, but what can they do? Where else can their talents be utilized? And I would think of, I would think of the staff that you employ as they're probably not quite a Swiss Army knife in terms of being able to do everything, but at least taking some of their core competencies of what they have and trying to discern, okay, if I have 10 people over here, what can they look like, somewhere else, and really and keep that workforce engaged too. If there's going to be some cutbacks in that government space, that's one area that comes to mind. And if you've been serving the government for a long time, you're pretty well battle tested to deal with large corporations too, because RFP completions for large corporations, those are not easy, but they're probably not too far distant away. They actually might be a little bit easier than an RFP for the federal government. So you may not think it, but you're more than qualified to take a dabble in that space too. I think you'll do just fine if you've survived the rigors of federal RFPs.
Okay. Michael, here's a softball for you. Do you expect immigration policies to have an effect on healthcare staffing within the international nursing market?
So I think it's worth highlighting that within the administration, there are some significant disagreements across officials and advisors as to what specific changes to make on immigration policy. So I believe Jeremy mentioned the H-1B visa program earlier. So I think we can take that as a signal for what might happen with things like international nursing. Some members of the administration want the H-1B visa program completely ended, zeroed out, all visas gone. Other members want that program expanded dramatically. And it kind of comes down to what are the individual advisors and officials' backgrounds in where they've worked and what their companies have been engaged in the past. So I think that skilled immigration through specific targeted visa programs like international nursing uses will be relatively unimpacted, but back to uncertainty as a watchword, depending on who wins the argument within the administration as to what to do with those kinds of visa programs, it could be curtailed significantly. But I think that's relatively safe at the moment.
Okay. So here's one that I think this one's for Jeremy. How can a staffing firm communicate our value to clients with the status of the economy and everything right now, with clients being somewhat hesitant and cutting back?
I think assuring them that they're getting a quality product is it's always important, but you're going to get great people from us. We vet them, we screen them, where applicable, we make sure they have the proper skills to be a nice addition to your workforce. I think I mentioned it earlier, the loss of vision on the value prop that staffing firms bring to the buyers of their services. And I think this goes right, I love this question. It goes right to the heart of that. You're getting a quality product. You're not overpaying for it. You're paying the right amount. We're finding you people because we're good. That's what we do. We're good at it. And you need our help to do it. And you're going to get someone who is going to have a positive impact on your business. I think amplifying what they're getting in the way of quality, I think it's so important. It's not just a numbers game. We're not, if you're looking for 10 people and we can only find 6 good ones, we're going to send you 6 good ones. I'm saying from a skill standpoint, I'm not saying they're bad people, but I'm saying 6 people that hit the mark of what you're looking for, you're going to get high quality. And I think assuring them of that and then making sure you back it up. You got to deliver. So, if you have someone that is sort of just miscast, pull them back, because that's your reputation there. If you're winning on quality, got to deliver quality. And that's true for everyone's business, but I think
Or any business, right?
Especially now, in this industry where there's been sort of a forgetfulness about what buyers of your services have been getting for all these years. So they need a reminder and some solid performance to back it up.
Okay, I'm going to go back to Michael on this one because this is another softball for you. When can we expect the staffing market to go back to normal?
Go ahead, Michael. You got answer that one.
I think we need to see reacceleration in the labor market, and that is not presently something being forecast by much of anyone for the next few years, unfortunately. Okay.
And I'm gonna put this out to both of you. How do you think AI will impact the staffing industry, which is a whole nother webinar. We've done a few of them this year, but just put out your thoughts and with regards to the topic at hand, please.
I think candidate fulfillment, candidate reviewing and sorting, you can, with the right AI tool, it's a lot more effective than a pivot table in Excel. And I've heard a lot of successes there. We all know that staffing firms, again, I was just talking about quality, but speed, fill rate percentages, and timeliness is so important. And I think that's probably the most effective area where AI can be useful. To be candid, a lot of the conversations I'm having with owners and operators there was an expectation to have more options at this point in the availability of product set. So I think that's still going to be evolving, and we all know that there's no one size fits all. But I think that's a space that is ripe for AI assistance and winning a job, winning a deal because you were able to fill it faster. Again, with the right person, quality, but using an AI tool to help you get there. And let's face it, if it can help minimize some of your internal expenses, if you can have 3 recruiters instead of 5, because the tools are more on point, then that's certainly helpful. I don't know, Michael, what do you have any other thoughts?
I agree that probably the most direct and definitely the most immediate opportunities for staffing, given new developments in artificial intelligence, especially large language models and other forms of generative AI, are going to be top of funnel efficiencies. There's a whole lot of companies out there that have developed AI voice and chatbot recruiting agents that can handle doing the first contact and screening. I've not yet heard a single staffing company who's used those have anything but extremely positive, happy things to say about them. Then there's a bit of a back and forth, I think, with, say, specialized and purpose-built tools work a lot better at accomplishing whatever task you're trying to do than a generalized, let's go to this off-the-shelf product that has not been customized for our use case. For those general ones, what I would advise is that large language models, remember, they're text prediction engines. They don't reason, they don't understand, they don't know context or subtlety. They're just predicting the next string of text given their training data and the input prompt and other parameters given to them. So especially for more off-the-shelf things that have not been customized to a specific purpose or to directly relevant data, I'd advise that they're most appropriate when the consequences are somewhat low stakes. If they get it wrong, you don't need something that is always accurate or must have accuracy as a high priority, because they do get things wrong pretty frequently. And likewise, better suited when the output can be readily verified, checked, or dismissed without much effort. But otherwise, yeah, there's a lot of specialized products for staffing specifically that companies are very happy with.
Yeah, AI is the topic du jour. Like I said, we've done a few webinars. Thank you for answering that question. And I think we are at about the end of our time now. There are a few more questions out there. I apologize that we haven't gotten to them, but we will. Jeremy and his team have promised to follow up with you on the questions that we have unanswered at this point. I wanted to thank Jeremy and Advance Partners, not only for their sponsorship, but for their thought leadership. This webinar is actually a real pleasure for me personally to do with them, because they provide great content and, great thought leadership. So thank you for that.
Thank you for the opportunity. I really love the partnership with SIA. It's really so beneficial, mutually beneficial, I hope.
Yeah, and we hope to the audience out there that this is also mutually beneficial to you. For those of you who are members, you'll see some of the resources that we used today: the SIA Bullhorn Staffing Indicator, the Staffing Industry Pulse Survey, which, by the way, if you're not participating in our surveys, you might want to give it a shot. It's a way to get great data and to be part of a larger meaningful research. So we encourage you to do so. There's going to be a link in the slides for you. We also use the U.S. economic and labor market trends today for February. Michael has, I know, been furiously making updates as we move into executive forum next week on his reports as well. And of course, the monthly U.S. jobs report. If you're not a member, you won't be able, if you are a member, you will be able to access these reports. If you are not, please reach out to member services at staffingindustry.com for more information. I'd be remiss if I didn't talk about the tech toolkit. If you're looking at navigating the staffing landscape, the tech toolkit is a good way to do that, and it's available exclusively through SIA's corporate membership. I thank you all for joining, and I thank you for your great questions and your participation. These webinars are so much better when we get the kind of engagement we did today. I appreciate our audience, and I'm hoping that you'll join us on our next webinar. You can see that on our website at www.staffingindustry.com, as well as the replay, which will be sent within the next 48 hours, as I mentioned previously. And finally, a little bit about us, but with that, I wish you a great rest of your day. I hope to see some of you at Executive Forum in Miami. And Jeremy and Michael, many, many thanks for your expertise and your thought leadership today. Have a great day, everyone.